Welcome to Transformation Heroes by Feedia, a series dedicated to CX professionals.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformation Heroes. I'm Carlos, your host, joined with François. Hello, François.
Hello, Carlos. Good to be back.
Good to have you. Okay, so today's episode, we are going to be covering sentiment analysis, understanding what it is, and looking into the future of what the industry holds. So we'll break up the episode into two parts. We'll go into the first part being about understanding, and then the second more about the future. Just to kick us off, sentiment analysis has a lot of industry words usually, so it'd be great to kind of go into the foundation. So in terms of sentiment analysis, in a previous episode, we talked about natural language processing. Maybe, François, could you help tie them together?
Yeah, sure. So sentiment analysis is just one part of natural language processing, which is one part of machine learning, which is one part of AI. So AI, machine learning, NLP, so just based on text data. And then sentiment analysis is just one usage of NLP. And so is, for example, topics detection, entity detection. And sentiment analysis is very important when it comes to detecting pain points, detecting improvements. And for someone that works in a company that's looking to improve, to get better, to transform faster, you want to be very good at detecting sentiments. I say that's a good introduction in terms of what it is in general.
Okay, and if we dive into our second acronym, BERT. So BERT is used as a technology to help train computers, especially with ambiguous language. How would that kind of interact with sentiment analysis, especially with the kind of recent changes?
Yeah, so sentiment analysis, it has been there for a while, like more than 10 years. And we have seen like different waves of technologies that have been able to drastically improve not only the cost, but also the results of sentiment analysis. And BERT is one of them. Like there was a model that was very famous from Amazon, from AWS, which was basically trained just on product reviews. And it was pretty straightforward to train this model because it was basically using the reviews that are, like on the Amazon platform.
Yeah.
And there's like millions of them. And you have a rating from 1 to 5. And you also have a comment, right? So the emotion is usually very close from, like the rating and the comments. So that was a very good training set. And that's why like Amazon and AWS, they've been very, very good at this. And they've been doing it for a long time. Like, again, it's not something new. And then in 2018, Google, which is very good at machine learning research, they published a model which is still around, which is called BERT. And basically this model had another level, I would say, of natural language processing efficiency and result quality. And so you have like that 2018 to 2023, 2020, end of 2022, where the LLM kind of like took the flag to take it to another level. But I would say like BERT it's been used a lot, and it was a very good model basically for NLP task. And as sentiment analysis is one of these tasks, it's been used a lot by a lot of companies.
Okay. And just for anyone that's keen on knowing what BERT stands for, it's bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, I believe.
Yeah. In transformers, we hear this term a lot with LLM technology. But yeah, it was basically like before LLMs. And it used to compete with GPT-1 or something like this. Like it's very... Again, it's not that old. It's 2018. So time flies, but it's pretty recent. But it's been used a lot by CX team because whenever you're using a software that basically show you the emotion, here is like negative comments, positive comments, and so on. Like, again, it's machine learning behind. It's coming from Google if you're using BERT. It might come from AWS. And there are other training data on very specific data sets where you're going to mix, for example, reviews from IMDb, so movies, and product from Amazon, which both belongs to Amazon. To have like I would say a model that is not product specific, but that is pretty generic, basically.
Okay. Now, shifting our focus a little bit more into customer experience, why is sentiment analysis so important for customer experience professionals today?
It comes to understanding what's not working and what's working. There is metrics that you have, like you have the NPS, you have the CSAT, which we've discussed like a lot in this in the last episodes, but they're very oriented metrics in a way that it's very factual. What's interesting are the emotions, because when we talk about customer experience, like any piece of feedback is very related to human emotions, right? And so the sentiment score, the sentiment analysis gives you an idea of that emotion that you might not get from metrics such as a CSAT or NPS, which is again very factual. Like you got 4 out of 5. Like when it comes to sentiment, you're closer to the truth. I would say. And that's why this metric is very important. And that's why sentiment analysis has been around, again, for a long time. And it has a long way to go because we have more and more text data. So there is potentially more and more use cases with sentiment analysis.
Yeah, and I guess it can also help with potentially being an early indicator of churn or opportunities for innovation as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like also, I think one of the key trap, I would say, when it comes to sentiment analysis is, like making sure that you have something that's pretty simple and that you don't over-complexify it, because you have a lot of models and therefore a lot of software that will give you like 10 different emotions, like the customer is surprised, the customer is joyful, the customer is very pissed off, the customer, they're going to use like a lot of different emotions. And what we've seen a lot from a software standpoint is that like if you try to go more on the extreme, it's a lot more actionable for a CX team to just focus on the things that are actually working very, very well, which drive positive sentiments, and with the negative ones, which are actually an early indicator of churn, as you mentioned, but also, workload for the support team, workload for the sales team if they got to renegotiate contracts and so on. And sentiment analysis is a very precise way to measure that.
Yeah, and I guess, there is a potential challenge there. You mentioned that, having 10 different emotions being measured, you can go too granular and you could be missing the actual
Well, it's like if you make it simple with just the positive and the negative, and you take like, for example, you take the average sentiment score and you just focus on the 0 to 10% or 0 to 20, and then the 20 to 80, like it's a lot more actionable, because again, like you don't have 50 ways to interpret it. Like either it's working very well from a customer standpoint, or either it's not, and you got to fix it. And again, like sentiment analysis is a very, very, very good tool and a very good usage of natural language processing to identify these opportunities.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the percentages there. Just to give a little bit more context, it could be broken then down to neutral, with positive and negative being the two ends of it as well.
Yeah, and the neutral, it's, like you can't really do much about it. You can find similarities with the NPS calculation, with the Net Promoter Score, where you split into 3 groups. It's very hard from a CX standpoint or from a quality standpoint to act on people which are surprised. Like it's and again, like surprised, to be precise on that kind of sentiment, it's very hard. But just based on text. Whereas like negative and positive, it's also hard, but it's still simpler than having like 20 different emotions. So our recommendation is just to keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's given us a good kind of foundation of where we were presently at, or maybe up to the 2 years ago or so. Now kind of talking about the now and the future of sentiment analysis, I'd like to turn our attention to large language models, which you mentioned. How are they kind of shaping the landscape?
So no surprises to anyone, like LLMs are excellent at natural language processing. It's been the first use case, and they've been benchmarked a lot against older models such as BERT that we've discussed. And so they are excellent at sentiment analysis. And the big difference when you use the LLM to do that, or a technology such as a software that does rely on like LLM and not older models, that you can give a lot of context that's going to make it a lot more precise. So you can not only say, hey, I'm going to give you a text, a customer feedback from, for example, a Google review, or for example, a ticket, and I want you to give me a sentiment. You can go a couple of levels of analysis deeper, simply because you can say, okay, well, here is my context. Here are the sentiment that I'm looking for and the text I'm looking to analyze. Here are 5 examples which are very accurate. These are 5 examples which are very inaccurate. And so you can take all of this information, so real-time feedback, plus the context, plus the one that you're trying to analyze at this point, and you can get a level of detail and a level of precision that is by far, it's way, 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 way better than where it used to be before. And that's pretty good news, because you can tie it with the business results that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point. Just to drive that point further, the idea of not giving context means that you're potentially giving a model a very generic set of results and asking them, how do I improve,
and that's why, like, so, like there are so many sentiment analysis which are completely wrong, simply because, again, if you don't have the right context, like even if you don't have the right question, so if it's a ticket or if it's a survey response, but if the question is like, what would you improve versus what went wrong, like like the text answer that you're going to get, the sentiment is going to be very, very different, but you're trying to get the same idea at the end. But the way the question is formulated is going to impact a lot the level of analysis that you're going to get from natural language processing with sentiment analysis. So you want to be careful with that. And that's why the good news with the LLM is you can give all of this context to get very, very precise detail, which are close to not only, like the CX task, but the CX task in your business context, in your industry context, which is very precise.
Yeah. So if I were to summarize that, if I'm a new CX professional, I'm looking to take on this newer technology and understand how I can use this for improving the business goals and objectives. I would need to look into, the areas that we want to maybe change first. Is that how you would approach it? And then use that as a prompt to ask LLMs how we can...
I would use a software that does all the job for you, so you don't have to do it. That would wrap it, because then again, you have which we've discussed already, but with AI, you have the idea of data governance, data security, then precision, then improvement, then making sure you use the right model, which all of this is its own specific, challenge by its own. Every one of them is a specific challenge. And that's why, again, there are company like us, basically, where it's our job to handle data security. That's our job to make sure we have the right model. That's our job to make sure we have the right, the precision is up to the task. But to answer your question, Carlos, the way I would approach it would be to, first of all, make it pretty simple in the number of sentiments I'm using. So I would not use 20, I would use 2 or 3. And then I would correlate it with business data as much as possible. So your CRM information, so your, again, could be ERP data, basically anything that gives context, because then the sentiment by itself, saying your 25% of your customers have a positive sentiment, that is absolutely not actionable. You can do anything with that information. However, if you focus on a specific type of customer, on a specific type of product, and then that you're able to say, well, on the large accounts, the sentiment is excellent. On the smaller accounts, we have a problem because the emotions, even though our metrics are pretty good and commercially it's going all right, the end users, we're seeing a delta with the sentiment score that is pretty high, let's say 50%. Then you can focus and then you can turn that into something like an action plan. And I would say also a last point on that is you also want to make sure that you have a way to give feedback to the system, that if it's not up to date, not up to date, but not precise enough, or sometimes you get it wrong, because you will get it wrong with AI, you won't, it's non-deterministic, so sometimes you will get it wrong. You need to find a way that the precision goes up and that the precision is also measured.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so much more useful to work with a platform or with a software company, because they're doing that background work for you and you don't have to start training the models. Yeah. They're doing the back end. Okay, so something that is gaining importance at the moment is trend and anomaly topics in sentiment reporting. It's relatively new as a subject, at least for me. So I'd love for you to maybe explain what it is and how that can help businesses anticipate customer needs.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So again, you measure your NPS, you measure CSAT and so on, but at the end of the day, emotion is going to be a little bit ahead of these metrics in terms of what really happened on the ground. And so you want to be able to detect trends and outliers. So again, if you have a specific type of customer, if you have a specific type of product, basically if you have that business data, you can correlate it with the sentiment, and then you can identify the outliers, the ones that are really having a larger impact on the satisfaction, where it's this product plus this type of customer equal, we're very, very, very good. And then on the contrary, you can have the other way around. And so you want to detect the spikes, basically, when they happen. And then you want to find the root cause analysis, right? So if, for example, let's say you're operating a retail chain and you have a problem with one of your supplier or one of your provider for cleaning the stores, you want to identify that there's a cleaning issue on some of the stores. And then you want to correlate that information with the fact that it's a specific supplier that's causing the problem. And you want to identify this before it has any impact or any big impact on the business. And sentiment analysis is just one way of doing it. If you have the right sentiment plus the right business context and you're able to detect these outliers, then you can pinpoint very precisely where the issues are. And usually it's going to be more subtle than the NPS, for example, which is going to be more generic and more about loyalty and getting back, right?
Okay, this is more of an opinion question. We talked about sentiment can be very confusing if you've got 10 different emotions to measure, and we are looking maybe into more large language models being able to feed and understand data. from your opinion, are we moving towards more of a nuanced emotional categorization? So what I mean by that is, really going into, is this really negative? Is this really positive? Or real-time analysis in terms of like being as adaptive as possible as feedback comes through? Are we looking at more long-term vision? Are we looking at more short-term, or is it a mixture of both?
I think it's a mixture of both, Carlos. And I think the key element of success in this whole operation is precision. At the end of the day, can I trust what the AI is going to tell me on the sentiment of my customers? And can I trust it? And is it good enough? And if it's not, how long does it take to be good enough? And then I would say the data management to find the outliers and so on. It only works if the first AI workflow, which is basically measuring with very high precision whether that customer is pissed off or not, is good. And we have a lot of use cases which it's pretty tricky. Like if the question is, like, what would you improve? And someone replies nothing, like most models, and you can do the test if you're using a software right now, most model will point it as negative. They also like nothing is negative. But actually, if you put the right question, no, it's not negative. It's actually pretty positive because it's great because there's nothing to improve. Like, and like this level of detail is important, and it's very easy to mess it up, mostly when you've lots of volume, and it's pretty hard to check whether it's doing a good job or not. And so if it's analyzing in real time, like a couple of thousands of feedback, but also on the other side, you're not checking that the first 100 were correct, well, then you might end up with detecting outliers, which are the wrong outliers, simply because the first metric is wrong. And it gets even more complex, Carlos, when you change, or your provider change models. Again, we've mentioned BERT, we mentioned LLM now. We used to have, very specific model from Amazon that did this. So, there is also an evolution of the technology, and it's not going to stop. It's going to accelerate.
Speaking on that a little bit, it'd be great to understand a little bit about multimodal sentiment analysis. So what I mean by that is combining a traditional text feedback alongside voice, alongside video. Do you maybe speak on where we are with that?
Well, that's a bit of the future, right? Like the model that we use, they are getting multimodal. I think the famous one is obviously ChatGPT, but there will be more in the future, is the ability to not only manage text, but also manage voice. So there is a couple of use cases which are very simple to understand from a CX standpoint, is quality with the customer support, and then it's a sales, like basically all the sales calls. And you have so much information in there that you can transcribe it and then send it to the model. But also, like, if you just have the audio, you can also send it directly to the model. And then you have the same with video. Customer experience and video, it's a little bit more tricky simply because you don't record your customers when they give you feedback. Yes. However, though, there is a point on a customer interview, mostly when there is like focus group, mostly when there is like product research, where you do have quite a lot of video. And this multimodal models, like they're going to bring some value there. But I think again, if we take a step back from more like, hey, I'm looking to understand what my customer is saying, and I'm looking to transform my business so it adapt faster to how society is changing. Like, in my opinion, there's still plenty to do with the text data that we have. Yeah. Again, e-reputation, tickets, surveys, social networks, like just the four of them, there is plenty to do.
Yeah, and it's not, at this stage anyway, it's not a dying market. Like social media is still...
No, absolutely not. And also, like, there is one point that we haven't mentioned, Carlos, but you can do the same. If you're more on the CX/marketing part, you can do the same with your competitors' data, right? So, like, you can also identify pain points, outlier, or areas of improvements on your competitors because you have access to the Google reviews, you have access to Trustpilot. So you can find some information and leverage sentiment analysis to identify this for you.
Yeah. Now, we can't talk about the future of AI without talking, or at least discussing the ethical implications. So, are there any frameworks to improve trust and effectiveness in sentiment analysis in order to, make sure that the customer experience data is kept private and secure, as well as being ethics?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Carl. So first of all, you can replace personal identifiable data, such as names, account numbers, and so on. Again, you can use AI to do this. Does it very well. You also sometimes want to remove insults. Again, you can use AI to do that. Works very well. So you want to, before you do sentiment analysis, you need to treat and update, or like, there's a little process to have the right information and to have like basically, like, when you send the data to a model, like, you don't want to send all your customers' data. And in verbatims, So again, could be Instagram comments, could be a ticket, could be it could be Google review. Like you might have personal data, so you want to be careful with that. And then when it comes more to the user that are going to leverage sentiment analysis to do their job faster, you want to make sure that when it's coming from AI, it's mentioned that it's coming from AI, that it's not, like out of the blue that we give you that it's negative or positive, but it's been generated by artificial intelligence, right? So you want to make that clear. And also you want to explain to your team that the job is not to replace people that are doing sentiment analysis manually. It's just to help them identify stuff faster and spend less time reading like thousands of reviews or thousands of survey responses to identify what's not working. So more as here to empower you, rather than, hey, we no longer need people to analyze, people to do sentiment analysis. Like AI is not going to do the job for you. It's going to help you do more. But at the end of the day, like leveraging this insight into your company you need someone to do that.
Yeah. And you still need to be the person that presents, that pushes the action forward. Exactly. Okay, final question from my side. So the US is obviously a massive powerhouse when it comes to customer experience and customer-facing technology. So I'd like to understand from your point of view, how do things compare on the European side of things? Are we seeing a big shift towards US technology like ChatGPT? We obviously have Mistral based in France. It'd be interesting to know in terms of your knowledge on the sentiment analysis space.
Sentiment analysis, again, it's part of NLP, it's part of AI. In Europe, there is the AI Act coming in 2025. So regulation implies what we've discussed already, making sure you don't manage like personal data, making sure you mention that you're using AI for the generated content. And again, sentiment score is a little bit of generated content as well, like you're creating data out of the data using AI. And so, you want to make sure that you're up to regulation. That's one thing. And then when it comes to the big difference, they have better models in the US, of course, because there is ChatGPT, Anthropic, and so on. But again, like we have European alternative, which are very decent, such as Mistral.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing as well is we're seeing a saturation when it comes to these models. They've kind of worked on everything that's free and publicly available. And so they're kind of limited to an extent, whereas hopefully with the regulation that comes in place, we're able to then have companies be able to ethically go into their customer data and understand how they can improve, without the fear of potentially causing upset later down the line.
Yeah, completely agree, Carlos. That's a very good point.
Great. Well, that's everything I'd like to talk about. So maybe just to summarize what we talked about today, we covered the kind of sentiment analysis foundations, so to speak. So where it was, obviously, it's been about for a long period of time. Traditionally, it was all about having lots of different categorizations of emotions, which tended to over-complexify, is that a word? The problem. It looks very cool, but didn't really lead to action. With the dawn of large language models, we were able to expedite this process so it's faster, it's more effective, and it can work at scale. And what we're seeing is we can have better trend and anomaly detection, and we're able to tie that in with business context. And that's the really key part of, I think, this whole conversation is being able to link the business needs and your business context, whether that's your CRM, your ERP, the customer feedback, in order to take action effectively. And then the underlying thing was using technology with precision and using partners that you trust, that have the ethical considerations taken into account for you.
Thanks, Carlos. Very, very, very interesting conversation. See you at the next one. Bye.
See you in the next one. Cheers, François.